Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to another episode of the Ummah Times, where we help decolonize minds. And today the topic is the Islam and the environment. And today, our special guest to talk about this topic is Brother Nadeem. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Just to tell you a little bit about Brother Nadeem, Brother Nadeem is a researcher and author, and has authored and co-authored 8 books, 4 non-fiction and 4 philosophical fiction, including From Facts to Values, as well as other books. His specialization includes analyzing the Quran to resolve the big questions, such as in physics, evolution, epistemology, and consciousness. Nadeem recently gave talks at Harvard University and Oxford, and he is a grandson of Al-Hafiz B.A. Masri, who did a pioneering work on animals in Islam. And today we're going to talk about his most recent book, Ecolibrium, The Sacred Balance in Islam. Brother Nadeem, again, I want to welcome you to the show.
Thank you for having me.
How's your drive in today?
Alhamdulillah, fine. Thanks.
So, I want to talk about how this whole project got started. If you can tell me a little bit about because I know you're one of the authors of this book. So how did this get started, and how long was in the making?
Well, what happened was that in the 80s, there was a lot of concerns started building up concerning the environment. And I was studying engineering at the University of London. And so one of the projects I did was my thesis in my final year was on irrigation, and I decided to combine the environment with it. So that had never been done before in the environment and irrigation systems. And I was just very concerned about the way things were going, and I was walking on the Strand, and I heard Cat Stevens' song, Use of Islam, about, where will the children play, in terms of what's happening to mankind, and what future do we really have if we keep destroying the environment and our social systems. So at that time I was used to go on the weekends to my grandfather's place, because they used to make really good food. And so when I went there, he had already been working on animals and Islam, which is another story. And I told him that we really need a book on the environment in Islam, because it doesn't exist. So it was in 1989, and he said, yeah, that's a good idea. So he said, okay, I'm going to work on it. And so he said he went through the whole Quran just looking at the environment and picking out verses. And then he went through so many hadith. And then, so his project was also to collect all hadith on the environment that he could get his hands on. And then I helped him also compile hadith, and that took a while. And then what happened was that he started to write the book, but he passed away in 1992. And but there's a chapter that was published in a publication by Castles, and it was called Islam and Ecology. The book was called Islam and Ecology. For example, they had Buddhism and Ecology. So it was a series, and his chapter was the main chapter, the keynote chapter. And I'd helped him a bit with it. And he was working when he had this disease called fibrosing alveolitis, but he was so much into research that he was working while he was in that condition, respiratory condition. And then after he passed away, I continued with that work. So that's from 1992 until the year 2000 something, and I brought in my other author, Mehran, and then we worked until 2011, and then we just didn't do anything. You see, the problem was that I was actually trying to publish it in the late 90s, but it was very difficult to get published. So it kept going on and on and on. So from 2011 to 2018, I gave talks overseas, and alhamdulillah, I thank God that it wasn't published, because I gained more knowledge over the years. And then finally there's a publisher that's going to publish it in England. And I think we have now the knowledge is infinite, but I think that we have a kind of a complete picture as far as, how does Islam deal with the subject of animals and the environment.
Yeah.
That is, as far as I'm concerned, no one really has tackled it the way we have.
And your book touches on on many areas. I mean, it's an over 300-page book I was looking at.
Yeah.
There's many areas that you do touch upon in a very holistic way. So, my question to you is, and it might be, I don't know how much you covered that in the book, but I just wanted your take on it. Is there a connection between, the advent and domination of capitalism and the current degradation of the environment and human health? Was the environment in a better shape, in your review, before the advent of the industrialist capitalist age?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really gone because then you'd have to really study, what was the environment like in the Middle Ages in Europe or the Middle East, but definitely, what's happened is that, for example, in farming, you have this monoculture where you use pesticides, and now Monsanto, which was taken over, has been taken over by Bayer, and they have their Roundup weed,
Exactly.
which is really, destroying the soil, and then we're having problems when we ingest the food. It leads to cancers, and for example, Bayer has had to. They were sued for a lot of money, and they've had to give in 2018 $10 billion to the people who sued them because they won the cases. So in the atmosphere, we have pollution. So for example, a lot of people who supposedly died from COVID, they actually died in Italy from respiratory problems, because in that area in Italy, it's heavily polluted. Similarly, Wuhan, for example, is heavily polluted. So a lot of these cases, which are supposedly COVID, they're actually, it's because, people have become unhealthy, right? Plus age as well, right?
Yeah.
So really, the devastation of the environment, like, it really has affected, and for example, factory farming, hormones, right? In chickens, you stress out, animals, and you give them hormones, and then what you're eating is not really good, right? So it's like, there's a chief Seattle, he said, I don't know how many years ago, but he said that basically, he was talking about white man, right? That white man is going to destroy the earth, and, like, he's destroying the bed in which he lies in. And this is happening, and it's continuing to happen. Where the politicians and all these people are just giving lip service. It's really the corporations that control everything, and
I mean, I think kind of just building on to Zishan's points. So I think, it's fair to say that Islam has a different worldview in terms of looking at the animal versus the secular, because capitalism and the industrialization that happened in the past couple of centuries is essentially a very product of secularism.
yes,
right?
yes.
So
Yeah,
can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that, you see, the problem with humanity is that you always end up getting, an elite class, and the elite class can, want to rip off everybody else, the masses. And that's been happening in the Roman times, in China, in Europe, even in the Islamic times, after the first four Khalifat, you still ended up with a kind of an elite class, even though they were kind of following the system. So it wasn't as bad, so what's happened is now with the technology, it's made things much worse, right? I mean, just to use an analogy, before, when you had wars, it was bad. But now with our wars, we can really devastate the earth, right? So similarly with our technology, we can really rip down the forest like, never before. And so the problem is being compounded, and species are dying that we don't even know exist. Can you imagine that? That there are some species that are dying that we will not even know existed, right? So this is, but then what is the Islamic view, right? That's what we should really get into. Like, what is it, and how does it contrast with this view?
Yeah, and it's actually, and it ties in. What I was also going to mention is that, like, with the oncoming of the industrial age, they didn't care about, conserving forests or conserving habitats, right?
Yeah.
And it was very telling that in your book you also chronicled how the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his successors were big on conservation, right?
Yeah.
Where in your book it was mentioned that they had called Himma, regulated sanctuaries, that reserves were set up by the Prophet, peace be upon him, and continuing on with the first Khalifa, etc. If you can kind of touch on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I have to review the details for that, but I think basically you've mentioned it. Can you imagine in those days they had, like, they were thinking of conservation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When they had so many animals,
Yeah, and it was exactly. It's unheard of. Like, I don't see, like, I don't find that in, like, in such depth that they had such strict rules on conservation,
They're very
like
strict.
by the Byzantine Empire,
No,
or by the Persian Empire.
Because I think that all, I I think, in your book you also talk about it, but, I think it all trickles down from Islamic viewpoint to the fact that, human beings have been placed on earth as wazirans, right? As Khalifa, like meaning caretakers of this very earth. So I think, it's basically built in the Islamic Aqidah, our purpose in life and what are we here for on earth.
Exactly.
And everything else just kind of emanates from that very fundamental basis.
So actually, after studying this subject for years and years and years, and I realized that, okay, so for example, let's take the analogy of physics. You have Newton's 3 laws, I won't get into them, but you have 3 laws. And with those 3 laws, you can explain the whole of mechanics so long that the speed is not close to that of light. Then you have to deal with other things, ways of calculating things. So if you study the whole Quran, this is my conclusion, you come up with 4 principles, and those 4 principles govern everything. So what are those 4 principles? What it is that the first principle, which I call ecological recognition, is that everything belongs to the Creator. Okay? Of course, before that, you have to kind of confirm and that the Creator exists, right? Yeah. And then you have to know the nature of the Creator, and then then one of the aspects of the Creator is that He owns everything, that nothing belongs to us. Now, if people had this concept that nothing belongs to them, it means they're taking care of it. They're trustees. So if someone gives you something to take care of, and he says, I'm going on a journey, will you take care of it? Are you going to despoil it? And, so when he comes back, what the heck did you do with my stuff? I gave it to you as a trust, right? Now imagine that trust is from the Creator. Would you not take care of it? So, and then would you get arrogant? Would you say, oh, this is mine? It's not yours. It belongs to the Creator. So you remain humble, right? So there are actually Quranic verses, a lot of Quranic verses that saying that Allah is the owner of, everything. That's the first recognition, ecological recognition. The second one is, what I call the equigenic principle that must be maintained. And the equigenic principle is a long story about that, but basically it's a term that I coined up when my colleague Mehran and I, we were trying to show that rights are not man-made. They're based on the equilibrium in nature. In other words, when you see that if you harm a component of nature, there's a cascading effect. It means that thing, the animal, whatever, has that right, not because it's a manufactured right or a synthetic right, but it is the right that belongs to that creature inherently, because if you disrupt that animal, then it causes a cascading chain. It creates an imbalance. Therefore, the right is, you recognize it by looking into nature. It's not something man-made. Because the argument was from the atheists and the liberals and all that there's no such thing as a natural right. They're all synthetic. But we showed that no, it comes from nature. So, for example, there was a person in Australia who made a jacket of snake skin. He was an actor. Now, everybody wanted to do that, so they killed all the snakes. When they killed all the snakes, the rat population went up. They ate all the crops, and then there was famine in Australia, in a certain part of Australia. Therefore, we said that it is the inherent right of the snake not to be harmed. It is the equigenic right. Genic is origin, equi is equilibrium or balance, or that which is equal, right? So this is and there are verses in the Quran that say that you should look at the structure of the universe and you'll see the balance. And then when you deal with human beings, you must also weigh things justly and maintain the balance. Mm-hmm. So in one verse, it's talking about economic balance and fairness and justice, and the universal structure, which is the physics, the balance in that. And plus, then of course it leads to the balance overall, right? Because this universe is in a balance and you have to maintain. It's saying maintain the balance. Now the interesting thing is it's not saying create the balance. It's saying maintain the balance, because the balance is already there. We're not maintaining. We're not doing what we're doing is actually messing it up. So Allah is saying maintain it, don't mess it up, right? So that's the second ecognition. Now the third one is that in the Quran it says that there's not a crawling thing on the earth, nor a two-winged flying creature, but they are in communities like yourselves. So and then everything will be brought back to Allah. That's what it's saying. That verse is saying. So really, all animals are in communities, and this concept was not known until the 20th century. That they're in communities, which means that then the last concept is, what are communities made of? Individuals. So every animal is unique a little, there will be no two ants that are actually, if we had knowledge, the same. They have their own individualities. They communicate with each other. As in the Quran, it talks of Suleiman, and ants, when they see Solomon's army coming, say, we better get out of the way, otherwise we're going to be crushed. And interesting, the ant that communicates is a female ant. And we know that female ants are on the lookout. And in fact, Edward Wilson, in his book, he states that these ants, they will communicate and get out of the way. And he didn't know about the Quran. They're just looking at it in the field. So, now the interesting thing is, look at the relationship between these ecognition. So say, for example, the second ecognition, which has to do with the balance. How is that made up on the earth? It's because of the animal communities, right? So you have a termite community that's structured in a certain way. And that termite community, because it's structured in a certain way, and it interacts with other communities, animal communities, they create the balance, right? So if you destroy the community, what happens? You destroy the second ecognition. So if you destroy the third, you destroy the second. Now, if you maintain the second, you maintain the third. And if you destroy the lowest one, the one the rung, it is the personhood. The last one was personhood, the one about animals having I was talking about animals communicating. That's personhood, that ecognition. Okay, that if you respect the personhood, you respect the community. If you respect the community, you create the balance. And if you create the balance, you're really worshipping Allah. You're conscious of Allah. So that's all interconnected. Now, I think that you also had mentioned that. What about before this interview? That what about the capitalist model? Or the capitalist model doesn't have any of these. Look, it doesn't have this consciousness of the creator. There's no ownership. Therefore, I'm the boss. I can do anything. Okay. Then it doesn't have respect for the balance. In fact, a lot of people are saying there is no such thing as balance. The reason is because a lot of these researchers, if they say there's a balance, it points to teleology, i.e. design. And design points to what? God. So they say there's no balance, which is ridiculous, right? Because every now and then something happens. Like, for example, the latest news is that the reef sharks, they are dwindling in the areas around the world. And they're saying, but this upsets the ecosystem. Upsets the ecosystem means disequilibrium, right? That's what it means. Like going away from the meson. So it doesn't have that, okay? Community structure. They don't care about community structure. If they want to create mining or something, do you think they really care about termites or something? They won't care about that, right?
No less humans.
Yeah. Forget about, I mean, look at what's happening in Congo, when they're mining and all that stuff, okay? And of course, individuals, who will care about individuals? I mean, they don't care about human individuals. What are they going to care about animal individuals, right? So I mean, capitalism is a total failure, okay? And people have to wake up and, smell the coffee, which hopefully is grown ecologically, and realize this, right? And I think that a lot of people are realizing this. But, there are a lot of forces that don't want people to see the Islamic perspective. It's just plain and simple. But this is the Islamic perspective. The other aspect of it is that are we unique or are we not unique? Someone will go to an extreme and say, no, we're just like everything else. That's not true. We are unique. But where does our uniqueness lie? Look, so, for example, I presented a paper on the uniqueness of human beings when I was, that was in Poland for a conference. And basically, basically what I was saying in the paper was that we're not unique in communication. Animals communicate too. Animals live in communities as well. Animals have revelation. Why? God has programmed them to do things like the bees and this and that. But we have revelation too. Sentient, they're conscious and all that. So how are we unique? But we are unique, but how are we unique? The interesting thing is we are unique because we can mess it up. Therefore, we are supposed to not mess it up using our reason. This is where our uniqueness lies. Our uniqueness lies in actually trying to maintain the balance. That's where the uniqueness lies. And the Khilafah and all that, you see, so, this does mean, that the human beings would govern as representatives. So it has that aspect. Okay. But the root meaning is successor. So Allah wanted us to kind of take care of things as trustees. And the way this is linked in the Quran is the verse that says that this whole the mountains and all these, the heavens, whatever.
Subject.
They wanted.
Subject.
Allah said, that will you take the amanat? And they said that we are very cautious. We don't want to do it. We don't want to take it. But God, that human beings took it. But He says human beings are ungrateful. So if you are grateful, if you appreciate Allah, then you will take care of the earth and human beings, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the whole thing, and you'll be the Khilafah. That's basically.
And Jazakallah khair for that. And also, like what I found interesting is that it's in terms of how we should maintain the balance of the environment and of the planet Earth, is that on the day of judgment, in the Quran, it clearly says that the Earth will relate all this, right? It's amazing. And if you also look at what the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said about this, that the Earth will relate to what man has wrought and what it's done to the Earth. And when the scholars look at this, they say, this report is actually authentic, but it's strange. But we accept it. It's a fact, right? Because they couldn't. You can't see the Earth, like saying doing this. Yeah. But again, this is all connected to how we like. It's if we and I think in our previous interview we also talked about this as well, where if you treat the Earth in a certain way, it's gonna come back. And so this is a very deep topic, and maybe if we have a session sometime on consciousness, then we can talk about it more. But this is actually giving you a clue as to what is consciousness, because anyway, maybe I'll get into it a bit, then we can understand this verse better. So the way Allah structures the human being, in a complicated way, then a human being is able to access consciousness, which is a command from Allah. Okay, so I won't say more about that, but it's a command, okay? So there's nothing special about our body, because it's all made of particles, right? The earth is also made of particles, right? So, but the way Allah has designed it is that He doesn't want everything to become conscious, because let's say, for example, we'd have a problem because our sofa would start talking to us, and our teacup and everything, right? Maybe like one of those Disney movies or something, right? Yeah. So Allah has only made has kind of made a rule that only if it's configured in a certain way, like a worm and a human being, they'll be conscious, okay? But other things won't be conscious. But inherently, there's nothing special about the arrangement, because it comes from the will of Allah. Yeah. In other words, if I arrange it like this, then it'll be conscious, but if I don't arrange it like this, it won't be. But that's just arbitrary. It's up to Him. Therefore, when He wants to make anything respond to Him and talk, it'll talk to Him. Yeah. Because He'll make the earth just conscious. Like the mountain. Yes, yeah. He'll make the earth talk to Him and say, what did these guys do? Oh, they mined me, and they did this, and they did this, and these are people who did it. Okay. Yeah. Go to hellfire. Because, at that time, Allah is going to be judging people, right? Exactly, yeah. Maybe too late. Now, because, this concept is so, I would say so advanced. They're not superstitious or anything. It's so advanced that because they don't understand what consciousness is. Well, but once you understand consciousness, then you can understand all these things. These are very advanced concepts that are coming from Allah, right? So it means that you have to respect everything, right? Because a record of everything is made, right? Like, you have to really respect things. And, there's a native Indian proverb that says, giving dignity to a human being is above all things. And I would say that giving dignity to all life, sentient life, is above all things. Right? And then there are other, concepts like Prophet. We're supposed to follow the Prophet Muhammad, right? His example, right? What was he to us? What was he? He's a mercy to the worlds. Now, if we're following him, are we not supposed to be mercy to the worlds too? We are, right? Now, if every human being was a mercy to every other, creature or entity, then this world would become a paradise. We're supposed to aim for that, right now, on a scale of 1 to 10, I don't know, maybe 3, 4, I don't know what it is. At least if we get to 8 or 9, that's what I'm talking about, right? When you have these concepts. But anyway, yeah. Yeah, and I also want to comment on that in the book you reference innumerable reports of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, on how he cared for animals, and that's unprecedented. Yeah. Of any report that exists of a prophet prior to him, or any leader in the world from his age, or even now in the modern time, they're understanding and they understand this concept of taking care of animals. But that's just like, for example, I think there was an incident, and I think you can describe this better, where he was regarding the chick's eggs. What happened in that regard? I forgot.
Yeah, it was. I think the birds, like the chicks, they were being people were moving them or something, and he said that like take them back. They had taken them. Some of the Sahaba.
Yeah.
I said take them back because the mother is gonna miss them, and So it's just amazing, and this is what my grandfather found out when we started to collect those hadith, that there's so many of them. It's just amazing, right?
Yeah, we talk about consciousness, and domestication of animals is another issue as well.
Yeah.
And in your book, you also talk about animals having souls, right? That's like something unheard of, right? And no one really talks about that.
Yeah.
Like could you talk a little bit more about it and maybe clarify it for us?
Yeah, I think the verse that says that that animals are in communities. After that, it says that and everything will be gathered to Allah, right? Mm-hmm. That's what it says. So we know from there that these animals are going to be gathered to Allah. And then I wrote another article saying that although we haven't been given any details, in my view, that the animals do have a place in the afterlife, because otherwise why would they be called on the Day of Judgment? It's not just for testification that this guy treated the donkey badly, so Allah brings the donkey back. He says, what did this guy do? The donkey says, yeah, he treated me bad, because everything is in record anyway.
True.
So what I was arguing for was there's some kind of continuance, and plus remember in the Quran it says Allah is not unjust to his creatures. Now, if these animals have been made to serve us, and like the whole universe is a test for sentient entities like us and advanced aliens like who have so-called free will. If these animals are to maintain the balance so that we can have the test, then surely after the job is over, the universe is done, they must have some kind of reward. But I can't go and say, what it is, because I don't have any evidence right now in the Quran as to what it is, but I do believe that you see, because what it is that when some biological system reaches a certain level of development, then it is able to access that consciousness. This is why in the Quran it says they ask you about the ruh, say it is a command from your sustainer. In order to know it, you need a lot of knowledge, but of that knowledge you're being given little. Like I'm expanding it a bit, but so all these entities, they have this ruh and nafs. Nafs, has been used in hadith for animals, right? And that you should not harm any nafs. My grandfather talked about this based on the hadith. Yeah. So if they have nafs, they have ruh, and if they have ruh, they have that Allah is not just gonna abandon them like that.
So are you saying that how do you define? How do you categorize? For example, are you saying, for example, amoeba or worms? We have numerous worms. You just open your organic garbage bin. Yeah. You have millions of worms in there. If you just leave it for 2 days in hot weather. Yeah. So are you talking about, because they're animals as well, right? Yeah. And they have obviously some sort of a consciousness to perform their function. Yeah. Of what they've been created for. So are you saying that collectively everything A to Z will be resurrected? Yeah. But I mean, I'm not saying that if you end up in paradise, that there'll be a worm inside you. Whatever it is, because Allah is the most just. So I can't go around and say, okay, maybe there'll be a worm heaven, or he's going to make them into something that is in the garden that is equivalent, and then we're moving around. I don't know. But what I'm saying is that from my studies, for sure, the ruh and nafs applies to them. That's a whole big subject. Okay, how? Okay, can I prove it? I mean, then I'd have to get into verses. I have to get those verses, right, and hadith. But
if I can just jump in, I think just like on the surface, a person doesn't even have to have knowledge or has it not even have to do an in-depth study on how does consciousness occur. If you look at something, you could say they have life and they have awareness of not to be harmed. So if you're an insect, if you're trying to catch a fly, the fly will fly away because they don't want to be harmed. They don't want to be harmed or killed in any way. So they have a sense that someone is trying to capture it or try to hit it. Yeah. So from that surface level knowledge, you'll say, okay, this thing is aware of itself of not to be harmed. So it has some sort of life. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So that's a very interesting question you posed. And it's very interesting that during the golden age of Islam, the very discussions were taking place. I remember at the conference at Harvard on animals in Islam, one of the speakers had cited discussion during concerning these kind of this area in terms of animal afterlife. Scholars were actually discussing this during Golden Age of Islam, and there was one scholar that one of the speakers cited. So it was a discussion about how we're allowed to eat animals, right? So the discussion was like, well, if we're allowed to eat animals, like, so what is the justice in that? So one of the scholars, based on his studies or research, and in our discussions prior, there's like so much things to be unearthed. Like we have to skim the surface as to what the scholarship was. That scholar concluded that they will be compensated in the afterlife. That will be the justice of Allah. It was very interesting. Interesting. And before that, I never came across any kind of discussion that existed among Islamic scholarship in the past.
So there is some kind of compensation, and but in the Quran it says, "Do not follow that of which you have no knowledge, and you'll be accountable for your hearing, your seeing, and your thinking." So I don't want to kind of speculate and say what it can be, but what I can say is that from my viewpoint, there has to be something, because they are going to be on the day of judgment, as the Quran says, that everything will be gathered, right? So there's some kind of function for that.
From all the discussions, it seems like we, especially as human beings, obviously have responsibility, but we as Muslims, we supposed to be acting as custodial and custodians, of this earth that we have inherited, right?
Right.
And to basically maintain that balance we're talking about, you need to have some sort of a system in place, right? And actually, Islam kind of guides us how to actually go about and implementing that system. So where, we not just, provide justice to fellow humans, but also to other species that we share Earth with.
Yes, and shall I tell you something, that animals are also our teachers, that we can learn from animals. And why, for example, do 2 chapters start with, Nahl and Namal, bee and the ant? Why? There may be so many reasons, but one thing that I did realize was, for example, the chapter on the bee it talks of numerous functions of the bee, that they receive revelation, wahi, and to build nests and things like that. And the way they build their nests is so amazing, right? They're it's optimal from a mathematical point of view. Okay, the maximum volume from the minimum material. So each cell has to be a rhombic dodecahedron, and you can figure that out using calculus, which was done in the 19th century, and now we can do it. We've done it using calculus. So I'll give you a simple example. The example of the bee is actually telling us how an ideal government should be set up. Can you believe that? That's my conclusion. Because, for example, when a bee wants to find a new nest, then they split into groups, various groups. They go and look for a new place, and they come back and they do a dance on the other bees, and then they give them information of the nests, probably the size, what direction, where it is. And then these other bees, they don't just say, okay, let's go there, like, let's listen to this. They go and verify if it's correct or not. So imagine if you have an Islam. So this is where I see in Islam an ideal governing system, which is based on these 4 recognitions, which you get from the Quran. And so what you do is you base it on the Quran and nature, and of course authentic hadith, and you divide your jurisprudence from that. But what you have is you do research. You send experts. Let's say you're coming up with a 21st century some issue. Then you're supposed to kind of have experts look into that and come back to you and tell the judiciary, tell the ministers that this is what we know, and then these people will verify it. And then you make laws out of it, right? So these laws are actually based on the wahi, the revelation. And if they're based on the wahi, then they're the optimal laws for the community. Just like, the communities that Allah has created for animals, they're based on the wahi.
Yeah.
So similarly, our community is supposed to be based on the wahi. Now, if all these communities all these interlinked communities are perfect because they link with each other, the animals, it's the human community, which is not the right community, and it's not linking properly with the others, right? So, we can't be perfect, but what I'm saying is if we follow the Quranic methodology and the reason and, look into nature, right, then we can come up with a system like that for the whole of mankind. Islam is not just for the Arabs or something. Islam is for everyone is watching this. Islam is for you. The Prophet came for you, right? If you're not listening to it, I don't care if you're a Jewish, atheist, Turk, elite, downtrodden, doesn't matter. the Prophet Muhammad came as the last messenger for you. And if you're not listening to it because of rebellion, because you have desires, then that's your problem, right? But you have to really look, it's no joke anymore, right? Because right now we're on the brink of, total devastation on the earth. What is happening right now, plus, the possibility of major wars happening. So mankind has to come back to what their messengers had told them to follow, which is to be in submission to the Creator, right? This is, what more can be said, really? But that's what has to be done.
Yeah, exactly.
And the environment is one aspect of it. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I just want to actually, before, because this is a very vast area, and we got limited time, but before we do end it, I want you to touch upon a verse where it talks about how things are subjected. It's translated. It's the Arabic word sakhara, but it's translated as it's how things are subject. These things are subject to the human being.
Yeah.
If you can kind of touch upon that, because it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So, many years ago, I wanted to do a master's in environment, so I went to the U of T, and I wanted to audit the course. So there were these two professors, one from civil engineering and another was, he was in the environmental department. I'm not going to mention any names, but anyway, what happened was that in the first lecture, they're all master's students, and I raised two questions, one of them in the discussion, and I said, the problem with the society is that we want to dominate nature rather than live in peaceful coexistence with it, harmoniously. And the professor, he said that that's he kind of didn't agree with me completely, right? And the other thing he said was that there's no finality in science. Things keep changing, and one scientist says this, one scientist says that. I said that's not true, because the reason why that happens is because these scientists have vested interests, or they're paid by the corporations, and that's why they come up with certain results. So it's not independent, right? I got a phone call from one of the professors at home, and they said I cannot continue taking the course.
Really?
Yeah. So I think it's not just that. Maybe I said it very politely that the professor's ego was hurt. I think they also kind of realized that I'm coming from a different perspective, and I'm criticizing the society, right? So what it is that in the Bible, and we know that Prophet Jesus, he had the Injil, and they all had revelation, but these got distorted. And so what you have right now in the Bible is verses that are saying that we must dominate nature, control, right? So, and then, people get an excuse, right? They read the Bible and say, oh yeah, what's the big deal? The Bible is saying control it, right? So people, they don't want to feel guilty, and then, because, it goes against your nature, right? So then if you want to do something wrong, you say, oh, well, even the Bible says I can dominate. We're superior, right? We're the spirit species, right? But the Quran doesn't say, so the Quran it's very interesting that it's even balanced in this thing, believe it or not. It's saying that these things have been subjected to you for your usage, but remember Allah. It's always that Allah has given it to you, and you should remember Allah, or, then do good with it. So it's always kind of sandwiched, or it's always preceding the word sakhara. It's always talking about God. So in other words, you can use it, but remember the first ignition, remember God?
Yeah.
You have to have that. Because you see what happens is you can go to the other extreme and say, we don't want to do science. We don't want to do this. We don't just want to kind of just sit around and do nothing because human beings are evil. Or let's destroy all human beings. There's even this view. Destroy all human beings, right? Send a virus and destroy everybody because we're so bad. That's another issue, right? Problem. So it's actually this view itself is very balanced. Remember, in the Quran it says that we have made you the middle nation that can keep things in check, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So this ties in with that too.
What is also interesting is that when I looked at that verse last night, it's translated that we subjected these things to you. But this next verse, and it's connected to what you just said. Allah says, "Don't be ungrateful." Yeah. So it reminds you, And
amana, remember? There's another verse that connects ungratefulness with amana.
Yeah, I think so.
Imana, that it says that the mountains, they refused because they were cautious.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but so it's just all interconnected.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So
So when do you? So we'll put the link up concerning regarding your book, and we'll update our viewers. Where they can get it. It's by Beacon Publications, right?
Yeah.
Beacon Publications.
Yeah,
right?
in the UK. Yeah.
Well, Jazakallah khair for your time, Nadeem. Anything you want to add, brother?
No, I think that was great. I think we definitely need to talk about these issues a little bit more, especially in the Muslim communities. They are not taught as much as they should be. So Jazakallah khair again.
Yeah, and you're exactly right, because I see that many Muslims are just they're enchanted by some are enchanted by what they see in the West, and when they see they have a law for animals, and wow, they're so forward. Well, is actually, if you look at Islamic history, is the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He's the one who stressed, on animal rights and all that before they ever did, before any other civilization did. As far as I can read on this. So
I mean, even it was just some of the brothers mentioning just a few minutes back as well that even during the Khulafa Rashidun time, Umar Zilanho, he saw somebody putting I think it was like a Bengal kind of like nose big ring and an animal, right?
Yeah.
So he basically forbade doing that.
Oh, okay.
And also in terms of maintaining the weight that you load on camels and donkeys, right? Even horses, right? So he basically regulated that as well. So somebody cannot put, let's say, more than 2 tons on a camel, as an example.
Yeah.
And it was all regulated, and there were fines and repercussions if you actually don't follow through.
Yeah.
So I mean, our civilization, has actually even given us that much. It's just that due to unfortunate circumstances, we're not aware of our own history. And I think
we've been colonized.
Yeah, we've been colonized. Hence decolonization.
It
needs to take place.
It's part of the decolonization process.
Yeah.
Exactly. Again, thank you so much, for
thank you very much
sharing your thoughts, and I think we need to have definitely more podcasts on these topics, and we'll definitely leave the link in the description below where they can find the book, which is coming towards the end of this year, I believe.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. So again, Jazakallah khair for coming on board.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And thank you all for listening. Assalamu alaikum.